Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks. And update 1.26 is finally here and it's looking like the biggest patch in a very long time to the game. And so today I'm taking a look at what are arguably the three hottest tier 10 tanks of the current patch. Or are they? That's what I'm going to be breaking down for you today. Firstly, let's take a look at the newcomer to update 1.26. This is the Tesák. I've done a full tank review on the Tesák before. And how do I feel about it? Pretty much exactly as I said in my tank review. This vehicle, it's kind of okay at dumping out its two auto cannons in rapid succession. Very dangerous if it can penetrate its HE shells. Not so dangerous if it can't penetrate its HE shells. It's not exactly super sneaky, but if you set it up like this, you can be able to outsneak your opponents, as we can see there. One Tesák falling to another one. I'm playing on the North American server here, so this isn't playing on a test server, but I'm on my World of Tanks press account for the North American server. So that Tesák, they spent 500,000 free experience, well, maybe a little bit less if they were using blueprints to be able to have that Tesák on release day. And yeah, thumbs up for you, buddy. Although, to be fair, they don't have all the field mods. Maybe they don't have the luxury of having two builds. And I would thoroughly recommend using an exhaust and a vision system on this tank because it doesn't really have very good camo rating at all. But when you let rip, and we've got to be patient here. We're going to get to let rip later. We can't let rip now. Ooh, it's very tempting to just absolutely blaze it with, what is it, the 75 or like 125 rounds that this vehicle can pump out within about 5 seconds or so. Alright, so we've got two bat chats in front of us, the Centurion Action 10, and I'm just hoping that my team can manage to whittle them down a little bit. Hopefully these two artillery are going to focus with me and not focus on the heavy tanks up north, although I have to admit it's very tempting for self-propelled guns to focus on those heavy tanks up north. But when they got three juicy mediums that they can hit, they got to go for those, right? So this tank's damage potential in a magazine is 900. Now, if we can manage to penetrate every single one of the shells. But of course, this tank doesn't really have that much pen. Only 192 on its standard rounds. This is a tier 10 light tank. What the hell? And if you fire its gold rounds, you have 247 APCR pen, which means you've got 3 degrees less normalization on the shells. So they kind of counteract that pen advantage. But I'd like to clarify that the gold rounds on this tank, they actually cost the same pretty much as the AP and the HE shells. So this tank, it's kind of good for free-to-play players in that way. The problem is the gold rounds on this tank, or I should call them premium rounds on this vehicle, they do less damage. The alpha damage goes from 12 down to 9, so you're doing 25% less damage per magazine to be able to have that extra penetration. But of course, as with APCR, it's not really that much extra penetration. It's actually a big downside compared to the AP that I'd rather be using on this vehicle for the normalization. But when you finally let rip, it feels satisfying. But even though it sounds really cool, that was only 263 damage. Every other tier 10 light tank would have been able to finish off that tank in a single shot. I guess unless maybe a T100 LT had the mother of all low rolls. But I have to admit, it does feel satisfying. And sometimes just being able to go in and your opponent just hearing this onslaught of shells at their vehicle, maybe it'll be overpowering in a weird way, or I think most people, after they've got used to it, after the first week or so of the patch, probably going to have no problem with being able to shoot back. And I know that for sure, because I've been playing the Blesk, which is the tier 8, on my main account on the European server, and oof, it's been a little bit rough. But I have to admit, just for that like little brrr, it does feel good. But again, 128 damage, every other tier 10 light tank would have done that. So where is the speciality of the Tesák, right? Because I think I would have done what I've done in this game pretty much the whole with every other light tank. I guess for this mag, this could be quite good, right? We're going to just let it rip against a Leopard. We're going to bounce quite a few shells off them. We're going to do 601 damage. So I actually ricocheted a third of my ammunition against a very big, soft German tank. A little bit alarming. And I would have done very well with HE in that situation. To pen HE against a Leopard, I'm pretty much going to have to get all the way up behind it and be able to fire at the flat rear of the tank. You can't just auto-aim HE and just pray that it's going to work. And whoa, that sounded like a big shell from a Jagdpanzer missing my vehicle. But that means now it's open season on this Leopard. Let's go finish them off. And for that, yeah, it feels good. But again, I did 50 damage. But at least you don't have to worry about missing. If you do have a mag against a low health tank, you can just auto-aim and just hold down the mouse button and they will perish. Unlike another light tank, which you might actually have to focus about shooting there. But Whether that's enough to be able to make up for all of the disadvantages this vehicle has with its mobility, which is very poor, and also just that distinct lack of pen. But let's take a look to see what these HE shells are going to do against these two artillery. Now, the HE shells on this tank have got 50mm of pen. That's more than enough to dominate, and this is fun. And then we just right-click at the next one. And that's a little bit of a tip for you. If you have two tanks that are close to each other with these autocannons, just auto-aim at one, hold down the mouse button, and then aim at the other, and then the reticle will, as quickly as possible, switch from one to the other. If they're stationary, of course. Or if they're moving, you can just auto-aim immediately on the other tank as well, and that will allow you to be able to deal with two targets in very quick succession. And that's kind of like the only advantage that this vehicle has. I was quite impressed there to do 442 damage to the side of a Jagdpanzer 100, even though that's only half of what the 900 potential this vehicle has. I really didn't expect to penetrate half of my shells with only 192mm of pen that this tank has, but then again, the Jaeger was pretty much side on. So, look, a lot of you are thinking like, whoa, this Tesák, it looks absolutely amazing. Look at this. Uncle QuickyBaby went in and killed half of the enemy team and got 6,000 combined in like the first 6.5 minutes of this battle. Ladies and gentlemen, let me warn you. Yeah, this was a cherry-picked game for sure. These tanks, they're very underwhelming. They're very underwhelming. Exactly as I said in my tank review. Outside of specific situations, which you pretty much saw all of them in the replay here today, you'll find that you just can't do the damage with that impact damage. Impact damage, it's so important. Being able to fire a shot and then be able to pull back around the corner, not have to just sit there going and you get shot. You get shot and you lose all your hit points. And then it's upsetting and it's very frustrating. So unless you've got like a stationary tank that just isn't focusing you or focusing one of your allies, oh my word, these tanks suck. And I stand by my prediction in my tank review that these vehicles will end up with one of the worst win ratios of any of the tier 10 light tanks. So if immediately you're all disappointed that the new fangled vehicle of this massive update is positively underwhelming, at least from being competitive inside the game, then look no further than a couple of tier 10 medium tanks that have been hugely buffed in the current patch. Firstly, let's look at the K91. This is a tier 10 Soviet medium tank that has always been a great sniper inside the game. It's always had some of the best damage per minute inside World of Tanks. And then Wargaming buffed its gun depression massively. So you've got 9 degrees of gun depression, albeit over the side of the vehicle. Add to this having some of the best camo rating of any of the tier 10 mediums, and while the K91 was never popular because of its awkward playstyle with not having a fully traversable turret, when I learned how to play the vehicle, I thought it was definitely competitive. It's just not really an enjoyable kind of tank for people to play. They want to play things that have autoloaders, or play things that have high alpha damage, or play things that have armor. They want to play some hard to master fangled snipey tank that is just, as I said, very awkward to play. And so Wargaming have decided to hugely buff this vehicle. They've buffed the rate of fire to now a disgusting level where you can get a sub 4-second reload if you're using very sweaty equipment like I am. And also Wargaming have given this thing a fully traversable turret. And what that means is that now the rear mounted turret on this tank can just poke over the ridge lines. You don't have to kind of like expose the front. You don't have to expose so much of the tracks. And boy, does this thing just feel absolutely ridiculous now as a tier 10 medium tank. To put it into perspective, if you do set this thing up sweaty like I have, with all of the crew skills and bond equipment, you kind of got a tank as if it's an autoloader, just never actually has to reload. Bizarre, right? If you think about the tier 9 Soviet auto-reloading medium tank, I think it's called, like, what is it, the Object 580 or something? There's so many different object names to remember and 800 different vehicles. I might not even be getting it right. You know what I mean, the premium tank. It has a 4-second intra-clip reload. It's an auto-reloader, and its reload gets better as it unloads. But when it's fully empty, it's got way worse damage per minute than something like a T-54, for example. This thing has the same intra-clip reload as that tank, but just doesn't have to spend like 7 or 8 seconds reload once it's dumped out that 3-round magazine that the vehicle has. And so you can literally pound round after round after round with like a 4-second reload against your opponents. And that's something that'll get even better if you're using Adrenaline Rush, or alternatively, if you're using close quarters combat, for example, a new crew skill, where if you go within 50 meters of your opponents, you get a 2.5% better rate of fire. This thing's penultimate field mod as well. If any of you get this vehicle and are questioning why your rate of fire isn't as good as maybe you wanted it to be, the penultimate field mod on this vehicle actually allows you to sacrifice, I think it's 5% accuracy to be able to gain 3% rate of fire. And that is tremendous for the tank, and I would thoroughly recommend that you do it. You want to do everything that you can, every trick at your disposal to be able to lower this thing's rate of fire, because it just scales so well. It's already a tank which needs to fire multiple times for every time your opponents fire at it. You're fighting an STB-1. You fire twice for every time the STB-1 fires. Or at least, you fire once, they fire, you fire again, and then you hide around the corner and you wait for the reload, because otherwise they're going to get like their second in before you're going to get your third in, is what I'm trying to suggest. But just the overwhelming fire that you can get against your opponents, with now Adrenaline Rush going off, and also having things like Emergency as well, which increases your crew skills after you take a shot. Just the reload is just absolutely staggering. All of this scaling. I just wonder if Wargaming have really thought about all of these systems that they have in place. And this buff on this tank, I honestly think that it would have been more than enough if Wargaming had just... Like, look at this. This is 320 damage we're doing right now. This is not an autoloader, ladies and gents. It's crazy. It's crazy from that perspective. To be fair, this is with Adrenaline Rush procs, and I'm not using my close quarters combat build on this tank, which would be another way to play it. So I just wonder if Wargaming realize about how all of these different layers just scale together to create these outrageous vehicles. And I think that Wargaming could have easily just either given this thing the rate of fire or given this thing the fully traversable turret, and I still think it would have been an incredible tank. I was able to get 66% win rate solo on this vehicle before it was buffed, just by playing it like I did in my Masterclass series, and this was the vehicle that spawned the Masterclass series. Originally, I sucked in it. I thought it was frustrating, the tank made me angry, it was a huge skill issue, and as soon as I set the vehicle up, as you see now with the gun ram vents and exhaust to give this thing 40% camo while it's moving, and to have the rate of fire to lock my opponent's tracks down, then suddenly everything started to come into place, and I ended up 3-marking this tank super easily, and ending up with that like 2/3 win ratio. So now that this thing's been buffed, I can't imagine that it's not going to be outrageously good. And I do expect this thing will end up with one of, if not the best win ratios of any of the tier 10 medium tanks, if it's in the hands of the average to above average player. I do think that there's going to be a lot of players who don't know how to use this tank's strengths that do drag that average down. And so does that mean that we have a balanced tank on our hands? If casual players and below casual players are unable to make this tank work, but all of the significantly good players in the game are going to be just ripping through their opponents, does that mean that it's still a balanced tank within that regard? Maybe in some weird way. All I know is that it's very dangerous when you create a tool in World of Tanks that's incredibly powerful for very good players, because then you get unbalanced games. And is that what's happening right now as we have 2 K91s in a bat chat? The 3 buffed tanks, right? Well, 2 of the 3, but well, all 3 remaining tanks have been significantly buffed in this patch. It's meta players playing the new toys, and I guess it's what Wargaming want, right? This is what Wargaming want. Wargaming want people to grind down tech trees. They want to make unpopular tanks popular. It's just whether Wargaming are doing that at the expense of the balance of World of Tanks that I would question. And I think, well, I'd like to give Wargaming the benefit of the doubt. I think my gut instinct is that Wargaming have gone too far with the K91. I think they might have gone too far with the bat chat as well. That's a good tracking shot. Okay, your repair kit is used. Oh well, I'll just lock your tracks down again, try and get into cover. Oh no, the 13105 manages to get one shot in, and oh, betrayed. But at least this K91's going to have some fun, right? And I would have ripped apart that entire tier 10 tank destroyer, and there's nothing that they could do about it within that scenario. I guess they could have used a durability device. But even with the durability device, you're not keeping your tracks on against a sub 4 second reload. So, unfortunately, 9,000 combined, playing with 100 ping. Not enough to be able to take this battle down, at least from my side. But maybe. Anchi in there. Oh, no, they're not going to do it. GG to that 13105 for shutting those OP tanks at the end of the game. Monster round on the release day in the first few games that I played this tank. For a monster tank. The K91 is the hot of this patch. Trust me, if you're a good player to an above, get this vehicle, set it up like I have in my masterclass video. It's still relevant. Look at my crew skill guide and you will be ripping and tearing through your opponents. So maybe having like a pseudo auto reloader with only 320 alpha damage and having to have a 4-second reload by putting on fancy equipment doesn't really sound like the thing for you. Well then, look no further than the bat chat. This thing's hitting 390 every like 2.75 seconds. Problem is, though, it has a big old reload to build to achieve that, right? Unlike the K91. So the Bat Chat, video I featured of a new world record damage just on Friday. Here's how I feel about the Bat Chat in this patch. If you didn't check out that video, I thoroughly recommend that you do so. The Bat Chat vehicle, which I managed to 3-mark last week, is just absolutely phenomenal. And hello, Mr. Tesák. Is the Tesák firing APCR at me? Whatever, dude. Go spend another $500,000 on some fangled tank. I'll just get you out this game. Unlucky, dude. I just didn't want to leave the Tesák in this scenario. If he keeps proxy spotting me here, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. But I knew that I could be able to push him out of this situation. I think with those little Czech light tanks, you should bully them as much as they want to bully you. If you leave them in that scenario, they could be very dangerous later on, especially with that 12 degrees of gun depression over the ridge. But I was more worried about sitting in this position and getting spotted up and towards the town. Anyway, I digress. Let's focus on the Bat Chat. So the build that you see me using in the Bat Chat here is only vent, exhaust, and a vision system. This turns this thing into a very proficient scout. This tank has some of the better camo when stationary of any of the tier 10 mediums, and its moving camo is not bad. With an exhaust on this tank and vents, with a premium consumable, you're still going to have enough view range, but without the premium consumable, you might start to lack view range with a build like this. But what I want to show you in this game is, after we fully reload, just how this gun handling feels. It is absolutely outrageous. And another thing I want to highlight is this tank's gun handling without a rotation device, without vert stabs, without an experimental turbo, without stabilizer greasing. Take a look to see how we can be fully aimed within our reload, something that this vehicle used to have to do with only using like vert stabs. Look at this. We've even got about half a second, I'd say, where we're fully aimed. Goodbye, STRV-103B. To be fair, I did get a little lucky that I got my second ammo rack of the game, but I feel like I think I had an extra shell that would have just dealt with the STRV-103B anyway. So how crazy is that? And when you stack that with something like concentration, which is a crew skill now, again, go check out my crew skill guide if you want to know fully about this. Long story short, if you sit still for 3 seconds, you get 3.5% more accurate. And on a tank like this, that can really help. I honestly feel that the Bat Chat, for its sniping capability now, with concentration and maybe an aiming device and vents, is just absolutely outrageous. And one of the most fun builds that I used on the Bat Chat during my 3-mark session was that experimental turbo combined with an aiming device and combined with vents and using a directive as well. Oh my goodness. I almost got angry when I missed like 1 in 10 shots. And previously in the Bat Chat, I'd be happy if I hit kind of like 3 out of 5 of my mag. The buff to the Bat Chat has just been absolutely incredible, with them improving the aim time, improving the accuracy, and improving the bloom after fire. Which means that now the Bat Chat, which previously had to invest into things to improve its gun handling, arguably doesn't have to, unless you want to have hyper gun handling. And again, I'd like to highlight that in the world record damage that we saw in the video on Friday, The gentleman there was using vert stabs. They were using a regular turbo, and they were using a durability device on the vehicle. So they weren't using any of the equipment that I'm talking about today. So you've got to make sure that you're using the equipment that matters to you. All I'm highlighting now is that without any gun handling enhancement, this thing just pumps and dumps. That's all 4 shells, well, 4 out of 5, I guess, on the Panzer 7 there. And that's just crazy. Crazy stuff. The accuracy on this tank, it truly feels like it's this god tier sniper. And as long as you can manage to stay hidden, as long as you can manage to avoid your opponents from blind firing you here in the bush, nice shot there by the Leopard, then this thing just feels absolutely wonderful. But then here's the crazy thing. Because now we've been able to get rid of the vert stabs, get rid of the rotation device, and the fact that we're still fairly efficient without the bounty aiming device as well, just the regular aiming device that you would use on this vehicle, we can invest into things like the vision system and an exhaust and vents and be able to be very good at scouting. And you can even drop the vents and use coated optics if you'd want. But then again, your other aspects of the tank would suffer if you were to do that. With a premium consumable, I think it would be overkill. However, if you're not using a premium consumable, then maybe you do need to drop those, the vents to use the vert stabs. Sorry, not the vert stabs, to use the coated optics. Let me clarify, to improve your view range. So now we can see that, oh dear, my marksmanship not so great. But at least we hit the Leopard there. We're going to hit the next one as well. Come on, where are you? It doesn't look like we quite connected with the Leopard, unfortunately. So, maybe results will vary, right? I should have been fully aimed before I shot that Leopard on the move. It definitely looks like if you're sitting still, right, that concentration is useful. But as soon as you're not sitting still, then having crew skills like Armorer, which will be able to improve your accuracy by 1.5% the whole time and not just when you're sitting still, might be the superior option. And those are options that you can only really have the luxury of having if you do have those big 6-skill crews. So it's interesting that while Wargaming have made it easier for, should we say, new players to eventually get their vehicles up to an end-game competitive stance, boy, does it feel painful to not have some of those crew skills now. And that's the kind of the state that we're in. Previously, once you got to about 3 crew skills, all of the extras were kind of just optional. Sure, they made you better, but I didn't really feel that they were mandatory. Now, I do feel that if I have vehicles that don't have 6-skill crews, I feel a little bit sad that I have to play them. That I'm going to be a little bit slower because I don't have engineering. That I'm going to be a little less accurate because I don't have Armorer and I don't have concentration. And just going to push you up, Mr. 705A. We're gonna have some fun. We're gonna cross barrels at the end of the game, have a little bit of a wiggle. Hey, okay, cool. Looks like the NA server does have some fun as well. Shout out to you. Who's that? Azo HDAGG. Okay, well, America has at least fun, but not when it comes to naming. Unless, of course, that's the anonymizer. So, the Bat Chat. Is this absolutely god tier inside World of Tanks now? I personally think it's still more frustrating than the K91 for me, but I think that the Bat Chat will do better for the average and the below average player, and I think that for me personally, the K91 will do better for the above average and above players. So, irrelevant of what you choose, a new Czech light that's kind of a little bit novel, but not very competitive, old school competitive, or K91 being pushed into the echelons of balance. There's a lot to check out in this update of World of Tanks. And if any of you are inactive players who haven't played for 60 days who want to check out their K91, or they want to check out the Bat Chat, or they just want to check out all of the new crew skills, then Wargaming are running a campaign where over the next couple of weeks, if you return, if you haven't played a game in the last 60 days, you'll get a week of premium, you'll get 750,000 credits, a rental of the CS52 lease, the Borask, and an improved Battle Pass chapter, which will give you all of the extra goodies. And if you've been really inactive for 120 days, you can get a rental of the AAT60, and for 240 days, maybe you didn't get the Tiger Mouse last year, then you get a rental of the Tiger Mouse. And if you want to claim that for yourself, I'll put a link in the description or in a pinned comment down below. And I'd like to clarify that it's not sponsored, I'm not being paid, or I don't benefit from that link outside of I will get 3-5 times experience missions in game. So while I'll benefit a little bit as if from like a recruiter friend system, I'm mostly doing it for all of you. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know what you think about the 3 vehicles that were presented in the video today. The Tesák, the Bat Chatillon, and the K91. Which of those vehicles do you think that looks like the most fun that you'd like to try? And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.